Clarissa's birthday dinner. My house. 12 guests. The risotto had been simmering for 3 hours. White tablecloth, the good china, the Lenox set I bought the year Clarissa graduated from UW, candles, Bill Hargrove from next door, who brought a bottle of Malbec and his late wife's recipe for dinner rolls, Sandra and Pete Whitmore from Clarissa's book club, Derek's colleague Marcus and his girlfriend whose name I kept forgetting. 12 people at a table I'd set since 6 that morning. The risotto was almost ready when Derek stood up. Not to make a toast. He pulled out his phone, opened an app, started scrolling with the particular focus of a man who has found something deeply satisfying. Eleonora, while everyone's here, I actually have some data I wanted to share. Clarissa turned toward him. Her smile flickered, just for a second. Data, said Sandra Whitmore, and she said it the way you say a word when you're not sure you heard right. I've been doing an analysis. Derek turned his phone so the table could see the screen, a spreadsheet, color-coded. Eleonora's expenditures over the last quarter. 18 transactions with 0 measurable ROI, including, he paused, looked at the risotto in the center of the table. This dish right here. 3 hours of labor. Ingredient cost, $7.20. Return on investment, negative 800%. Clarissa put her hand on his arm. Derek, maybe we don't need to. I put together an optimization plan. 16 points. I had it printed. He reached into his jacket, placed a small stack of papers on the table, next to my plate, on top of my napkin. It's in your interest, Eleonora. Living inefficiently isn't charming. It's a pattern. It becomes a liability. 12 people looked at their plates. Bill Hargrove was studying the tablecloth with the concentration of a man examining a load-bearing wall. Sandra Whitmore had stopped chewing. Marcus's girlfriend, Ashley, I remembered then, her name was Ashley, was looking at Derek with an expression she was trying very hard to make neutral. I looked at the stack of papers next to my plate. 16 pages, printed in color. He'd used the good printer. I picked them up, placed them beside me, carefully, the way you set aside something you intend to read later. Thank you, Derek. I'll review these. He smiled, sat down, picked up his fork. He didn't know that I had just solved the equation. The answer was 16 steps, one for each of his points. My name is Eleonora Parker. I'm 67 years old. For 30 years, I was a senior accountant at Hartwell & Associates, then 8 more years as an independent financial consultant. I know what a spreadsheet is. I know what a liability is. And I knew that night, sitting at my own table with his papers beside my plate, what it means when someone reduces you to a number. The risotto was very good. I finished every bite. The next morning was a Sunday. I made coffee, the Costco Kirkland blend, dark roast, because I like it and because it costs $8.49 for a 2-pound bag, and I have never once felt the need to justify that to anyone. I sat at the kitchen table with Derek's 16-page optimization plan and read every word. It was thorough, I'll give him that. He'd categorized my spending into 7 segments: food and beverage, household maintenance, social obligations, personal wellness, transportation, entertainment, and a final column he'd labeled miscellaneous sentiment. That last one covered the birthday card I'd mailed to my friend Ruth in Phoenix, the donation I made to the Lincoln Elementary School Fund Drive. I taught there for 12 years before moving to Hartwell, and the Malbec I'd bought for Bill after his wife Margaret passed last spring. Miscellaneous sentiment. Negative ROI across the board. I set the plan on the counter and washed my coffee cup. Then I sat back down and opened the notebook I'd bought at Walgreens on Friday. Mead 5-star, college ruled, green cover. I wrote the date at the top of the first page. Underneath it, I wrote, Transaction Log. Subject, Derek A. Stone. I thought about where to begin. He'd been coming to my house most Sundays for 2 years, ever since he and Clarissa moved into their place on Eastlake. Their kitchen was small, and I had the big Viking range that Richard and I bought in 2003 and never once regretted. Sunday dinners had started as my idea. They'd become a habit. Habits, I'd learned at Hartwell, were the easiest things to cost out once you decided to. I began with utilities. Water usage, 2 adults for approximately 6 hours, including showers when they'd stayed over in the early months. Electricity, the range, the dishwasher, the extra load of laundry Clarissa sometimes ran because she'd forgotten something. Internet. I paid $84 a month for the fastest plan because Clarissa liked to stream, and Derek liked to work from the couch on his laptop, and I had told myself it was a household expense. It was. I was just clarifying whose household. I did the math carefully. I always did math carefully. That was, as Derek might say, my core competency. By the time I heard Bill knocking at the side door, I had 3 pages of notes and a preliminary figure that surprised even me. Ellie, you decent? Come in, Bill. He came in with a Tupperware container. Inside was half an apple pie, the good kind, the kind where you can tell someone actually peeled the apples. Bill's daughter had been visiting from Tacoma and had left it behind. Sit down, I said. I'll get you coffee. He sat. He was a big man, Bill Hargrove, 71, former structural engineer at Boeing, the kind of man who'd spent 40 years making sure things didn't fall down. He had a way of sitting in a kitchen chair that made it look load-bearing. He looked at the notebook on the table and didn't say anything for a moment. How are you doing this morning? I'm fine, Bill. Last night was informative. He wrapped both hands around the coffee mug I set in front of him. Outside, someone was mowing a lawn on the next block. Seattle in October, still warm enough for that. Ellie, he put those papers on your plate in front of 12 people. I know. I was there. Clarissa didn't. She looked like she wanted to say something. She said something, I said. She said, Derek, maybe we don't need to. Then she ate her risotto. Bill was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I looked at my notebook. Then I looked at him. Bill, do you know what the going rate is for a financial consultant in Seattle? He looked at me over the rim of his mug. No. $250 an hour. That's the mid-range. Senior consultants with 30-plus years of experience bill higher. I turned the notebook toward him slightly. Sit down. Tell me everything Derek has ever said to you directly. I need data points. Bill blinked. Then he set down his mug and pulled his chair a little closer to the table. Well, he said, there was that time he told me my house was an inefficient use of square footage. I wrote that down. He said, what? Last 4th of July. We were standing in your backyard and he looked over the fence at my place and said, Bill paused, doing the voice now, and he had Derek's flat affect exactly right. Bill, you've got 2,200 square feet for one person. That's a significant drag on your net worth. Have you considered downsizing? I wrote, July 4th, unsolicited assessment of neighbor's real estate. No professional standing, no request made. What did you say? I said Margaret and I raised 3 kids in that house, and I plan to die there. And And he said that was a suboptimal exit strategy? I stopped writing and looked at Bill. He said that. He did. I wrote that down too. Then I underlined it. Bill ate his pie. I drank my coffee. The lawnmower finished its work somewhere down the block, and the neighborhood went quiet, the way Seattle goes quiet on Sunday mornings, which is differently from how other cities go quiet, thoughtfully, like it's considering something. Ellie, what exactly is that notebook? A transaction log. For what? For every resource Derek Stone has consumed in this household since he became a member of this family. I'm calculating fair market value. Bill looked at me for a long moment. How much is it so far? Preliminary figure, $4,312. And that's just utilities and direct food costs. I haven't started on the ambient services. The what? Emotional labor, advice given, occasions organized. The time I spent last Thanksgiving listening to him explain to my brother-in-law why index funds were superior to the bond portfolio Howard had been managing for 30 years. Bill was very still. Ellie, are you going to send him a bill? I closed the notebook. Not yet, I said. I'm still gathering data. Clarissa called that afternoon. I was deadheading the roses in the front yard. I have 6 rose bushes along the fence, Peace and Mr. Lincoln and a Climbing America that Richard planted the year we moved in, and they needed attention before the weather turned. Hey, Mom, how are you? I'm good, sweetheart. I'm in the garden. Right. A pause. So, last night, it was a nice party. Mom, the dinner rolls Bill brought were excellent. I'm going to ask him for the recipe. Mom, her voice shifted, not quite a sigh, something more controlled than that. I'm sorry about what Derek said, about the way he said it. I should have. You told him to stop. I know, but I should have. Clarissa, what did you want to say? A longer pause this time. I clipped a spent bloom and dropped it in the bucket. I don't know, she said finally. Something. More than that. Well, I said, that's something to think about. Mom, are you angry? I considered that question the way I used to consider a set of accounts that didn't quite balance, not with alarm, but with a particular kind of attention that meant something needed to be found. No, I said, I'm not angry. Then what are you? Interested. She was quiet. What does that mean? It means I read Derek's optimization plan this morning, all 16 pages. It was very thorough. He has good instincts for categorization. I clipped another bloom. I'm working on a response. A response? A counterproposal. It's what you do in a negotiation. One party presents terms, the other party reviews and responds with amended terms. Mom, this isn't a negotiation. Clarissa, your husband stood up at your birthday dinner and presented a financial audit of my household to 12 people. If that's not the opening position in a negotiation, I don't know what it is. Silence on the line, long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. What are you going to do? I'm going to optimize. I heard her exhale. Should I be worried? About what? About, she stopped, started again. He means well, Mom. He genuinely thinks he's helping. He thinks efficiency is, it's like a value system for him. It's how he shows he cares. I thought about that. I thought about the papers placed on top of my napkin. The word liability. The column labeled miscellaneous sentiment. I know, I said. I'm sure he does. Which was not the same as saying I was fine with it. Clarissa knew the difference. She'd grown up in this house. Just don't blow anything up, okay? Sweetheart, I said. I am a 67-year-old retired accountant. What exactly do you think I'm going to blow up?
She laughed a little at that. It sounded relieved and worried in equal measure, which is a very particular frequency that only daughters produce, and only about their mothers, and only when they suspect their mothers are about to do something absolutely correct. Jennifer Collins called Tuesday morning before I'd finished my first cup of coffee, which told me either Clarissa had talked to her or Jen had been waiting for a decent hour and couldn't wait anymore. Sandra Whitmore texted me 17 times last night. About what? About the dinner, about Derek, about the spreadsheet. A pause. She used the phrase financial ambush 3 separate times. That's very descriptive of Sandra. Ellie, I've been Clarissa's best friend for 11 years. I have watched that man slowly, methodically, and with complete sincerity make every room he walks into slightly worse. And last Saturday he did it at a dinner table with 12 witnesses. 8, I said. 4 of them were on his side of the table and couldn't see the screen properly. Are you keeping score? I'm keeping records, there's a difference. I heard her laugh, short and genuine, the kind of laugh that means someone is delighted and slightly alarmed. Clarissa says you're working on a counterproposal. I am. What does that look like? I bought a notebook. Oh, God. Jen, do you have access to property rental comps for this neighborhood? A pause. Jen was a realtor, had been for 15 years, specialized in the north end of Seattle. Wallingford, Green Lake, Fremont. She knew what every house on every block was worth, down to the quarter. Why? I want to know what the fair market rate would be for weekly use of a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath craftsman with a Viking range, established garden, and off-street parking. Sunday through Sunday, roughly 6 to 8 hours of occupancy per visit. Silence. Ellie, just the comps, Jen. I'm not doing anything with it yet. The average weekly rental for something like your place, short term, would be somewhere between $300 and $400 a night. But for a partial day use, hospitality use, you're looking at, she was doing the math, I could hear it, maybe $150, $175 per visit as a comparable. Over 2 years. That would be, she stopped. Ellie, that's over $15,000. $14,800, give or take, I said. I already ran it. Another silence. Has he said anything else? Since Saturday? Not to me directly. He called Clarissa twice on Sunday. She told me he was processing. What does Derek processing look like? Apparently, it involves the word boundary setting used as a verb. Oh, Jen said. Oh, no. He also, she said in passing, mentioned something about community living options for older adults in the greater Seattle area. The line went very quiet. He suggested putting you in a home? He suggested exploring options. Clarissa told him to stop talking. Well, that's something at least. It is, I said. It told me I was ahead of schedule. Jen was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had a different quality to it, something between amusement and genuine curiosity. Ellie, can I ask you something? And I want you to know I'm asking as someone who loves Clarissa and also thinks Derek Stone is one of the most exhausting people I have ever met at a dinner party. Ask. What's the end game? Like, where does this go? Because you're clearly 3 moves ahead of everyone in this situation, which, honestly, same as always. But I want to understand the board. I looked out the kitchen window. The climbing America rosebush was starting to lose its leaves.
Richard had planted it the year Clarissa was born. 34 years old, that rosebush, still producing. Jen, when Derek walked into this family, what did he see when he looked at me? A retired woman, living alone, sentimental, low efficiency. Right. He saw a liability. Someone to manage. Someone whose expenses could be optimized and whose presence could be, as he put it, rationalized. I paused. What he didn't see was 30 years of contract analysis, liability assessment, and financial consulting. He didn't see the work. He saw the roses and the good china and the risotto and decided I was decorative. And now? Now I'm going to show him what I actually am, in terms he'll understand. Jen was quiet. Then, oh, Ellie, he has no idea what's coming. No, I said, he doesn't. But I do want to ask you one more thing. That office space on Eastlake he was looking at last spring. Do you know anything about that deal? A pause that went a beat too long. How do you know about that? You mentioned it, casually, a few months back. You said something hadn't worked out. Right. Her voice had changed again, slightly. Careful. The landlord said the financing fell through. Derek had been negotiating for 3 months. Good space, too. 1,200 square feet. Great light. He wanted it badly. Financing fell through, I said. That's what I heard. When was this? March, she said. April at the latest. I wrote it down. The following Sunday, Derek arrived at 12:15, which was 13 minutes later than usual. I noticed because I notice things. 30 years in accounting will do that. You start reading time the way other people read weather. Clarissa came in first, the way she always did. Kissed my cheek, asked if she could do anything, then immediately started helping, whether I said yes or no. That was Clarissa. She had Richard's hands, quick, practical, always slightly ahead of the request. Derek came in behind her. He had the look of a man who had decided, in the car on the way over, exactly how he was going to behave, and was now executing that plan. Pleasant, measured, calibrated warm. Eleonora, something smells good. Pot roast, I said. 3 pounds of chuck, carrots, celery, 2 cups of beef broth. I kept the receipt. A pause. I beg your pardon? I turned from the stove. I said I kept the receipt for my records. I dried my hands on a dish towel. Also, Derek, I have something for you. I went to the counter, picked up a single sheet of paper face down, and handed it to him. He took it, turned it over, read it. The color in his face went on a very interesting journey over the next several seconds. This is a parking invoice. 7 visits at the municipal Zone B rate for this neighborhood. 3 hours per visit. That's the standard metered rate the city charges, which I've used as fair market value. I smiled at him the way I used to smile at junior analysts who had submitted work I was about to return. Total comes to $23.60. I've rounded down. Eleonora, I think there may have been a misunderstanding about. You explained to 12 people that every transaction should have a measurable return. I agreed with you. I'm now applying that framework consistently. Would you like to discuss the methodology? Clarissa was standing in the kitchen doorway. She had a mixing bowl in her hands, and she was holding it with the particular stillness of someone who has decided not to say anything and is very committed to that decision. This is... I'm not going to... There's also, I said, a preliminary statement for utilities. I haven't finalized the figures, but I wanted you to have a working draft. I handed him a second sheet. I used the same methodology you used in your analysis of my expenditures. Seemed fair. He looked at the second sheet.
Eleonora.
You've itemized the water usage. Estimated based on the EPA average for a two-person household scaled to hours of occupancy. I noted it as an estimate in the footnotes. You've itemized the... He stopped. You've listed my parking as a line item and calculated depreciation on the driveway. Concrete deterioration is real, Derek. It's not sentimental. I found the engineering tables. He set both papers down on the counter, very carefully, the way you set something down when you need your hands to be empty. What exactly is the point of this? The point, I said, is optimization. You explained that living inefficiently is a pattern, a liability. I took your advice seriously, and I'm addressing the inefficiencies in my household resource allocation. I turned back to the pot roast. Dinner will be ready in 40 minutes. Can I get you something to drink? Behind me, I heard Clarissa set the mixing bowl down very quietly and leave the kitchen. Derek stood at the counter for another moment. Then he picked up both sheets of paper, folded them, put them in his jacket pocket. This isn't over. I know, I said. I have 14 more pages of preliminary data. He told Clarissa it was a boundary issue. I know because she told Jen, and Jen told me, which is a chain of transmission that has been operating reliably for 11 years and shows no signs of inefficiency. He also called her brother. Nathan was my son, 40 years old, lived in Portland with his wife Cindy and their 2 kids, Milo and Grace. He called me on a Wednesday evening, which was unusual enough that I knew before I picked up that Derek had gotten there first. Hey, Mom. Nathan, how are the kids? Good, good. Milo lost another tooth. A pause, the kind that means someone is figuring out how to say a thing. So, listen, I got a call from Derek. Did you? He says he's worried about you.
Says you've been acting a little... He was looking for a word. I could hear him looking for it.
Out of character. Out of character how? He mentioned something about an invoice for parking. $23.60. I used the municipal rate. Silence. Mom, are you okay? I put down the dish towel I'd been folding. Nathan, in 1997, I renegotiated Hartwell's primary liability contract and saved the company $400,000 in annual exposure. In 2008, I identified a structural error in 3 client portfolios during the crash and protected approximately $2 million in assets. I have been doing this work for 30 years. A pause. Am I okay? Yeah, you're okay. Also, I said, your brother-in-law called his wife's mother a liability in front of 12 people at a dinner party 2 weeks ago. I thought you should have that data point. A very long pause. He said that? He had it on a slide. Jesus, Nathan said. He said it the way people say it when they've been trying to give someone the benefit of the doubt for a long time and have just run out. How are the kids? I asked again. Mom, come on. How are Milo and Grace? He exhaled. They're great. Milo wants to be a paleontologist this week. Smart kid. Mom, what are you actually doing? I'm having a conversation with my son on a Wednesday evening. And with Derek? I'm having a different kind of conversation. Should I be... Nathan, your sister is fine. I'm fine. Tell Cindy I said hello, and next time you're up, I'll make the pot roast. After I hung up, I sat for a moment at the kitchen table. The notebook was in front of me. I opened it to a fresh page and wrote, Derek called Nathan. Nathan called me. Elapsed time, approximately 6 days from first invoice. Faster than expected. He is more concerned than he appears. I underlined the last sentence. Then I made a cup of chamomile tea and watched the news, which was full of the usual things, and felt, for the first time in 2 weeks, something close to calm. The family dinner happened on a Saturday in November, 3 weeks after the parking invoice. Clarissa had organized it. She did this periodically, what she called a reset dinner, a meal where everyone sits at the same table and passes food and pretends that everything is navigable. And sometimes, actually, it is. Clarissa believed in the reset dinner the way some people believe in the restorative power of sleep. I respected that about her. Nathan and Cindy drove up from Portland with the kids. Bill was not invited. This was a family dinner, but he texted me that morning. Thinking of you. I made extra chili if you need backup. I texted back, I have everything I need, but save me some chili. Derek arrived with a bottle of good wine, Opus One, which retails for somewhere between $300 and $350, and which he had never once brought to a Sunday dinner. I noted this. It was either a peace offering or a display, possibly both. Milo, age 7, ran in ahead of everyone and asked if I'd made the chocolate cake. Yes, I said. Is it the one with the frosting that's also chocolate? Is there another kind? He considered this seriously. No, he said, and went to watch television with the absolute satisfaction of a person whose most important questions have been answered. Dinner was good. I made pot roast again. The same recipe, same chuck, same broth, and cornbread from scratch because Cindy loved it, and a green bean casserole because Nathan had been asking for it since September. The table was full. The kids argued about something at their end, and Cindy refereed it with the efficiency of a woman who has been doing this for years. Nathan opened the Opus One and poured carefully, the way you pour something that costs what a car payment costs. For a while it was fine. It was actually fine. Derek was on his best behavior, which meant he was quiet and occasionally said things that were almost pleasant. He complimented the pot roast. He asked Nathan something about his work. He did not produce any papers. Then, over the green bean casserole, he said, I've actually been thinking about some things. About how we operate as an extended family, about resource sharing and expectation alignment. The table went slightly still. Cindy looked at Nathan. Resource sharing? Nathan said. The Sunday dinners, for example. Derek picked up his wine. It's generous of Eleonora to host, genuinely. But I've been thinking about the burden it places on her. And whether there's a more equitable distribution model, rotating hosting, or perhaps a contribution system where each family unit covers their proportional cost. I looked at him. He was not looking at me. He was looking at Nathan, which told me this was the alliance play. This was why he'd called Nathan. He was testing whether he'd built a coalition. I set the cornbread basket down. Derek, do you know what a Sunday dinner with your family costs? Itemized? Eleonora, because I do. I've been running the numbers. Food costs, energy, my labor at the retired consultant rate, which is $180 an hour, 2 hours of active cooking, 1 hour of prep. That's $340 in labor alone, plus materials. We're looking at approximately $420 per Sunday dinner, which over 2 years comes to, I paused, did the math deliberately, in my head, in front of him. Approximately $43,680, not counting the birthday party. Complete silence. Grace, who was 8, looked at her father. "Is Grandma Ellie selling the dinners?" "I don't think so," Cindy said. "Then why are there numbers?"
That is a very good question.
I let the silence sit for exactly as long as it needed to. "I don't charge for Sunday dinners," I said. "I never have. I never will." I looked at Derek directly. Because some things are not transactions. They are not resource allocations or equitable distribution models. They are what a family does. They are what I do because I love my daughter and my son and my grandchildren, and because your wife's birthday is in October and I want to make her risotto and set the good china and light the candles. I paused. And I would like that to be respected, not optimized. The table was very quiet. Nathan was looking at Derek with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of a man revising a theory he'd held for some time. Milo, who had been tracking this conversation with the attention of someone who didn't fully follow the words but understood the music, said, "The risotto was really good, Grandma." "Thank you, sweetheart." Derek did not say anything for a long moment. Then he picked up his fork and finished his pot roast. Later in the kitchen, Jen texted. She wasn't there, but Clarissa had apparently been giving her real-time updates, which was very on brand for both of them. "How's it going?" I typed back, "He brought Opus 1, I brought math. I think we're even." 3 dots, then, "Ellie, I have to tell you something, but not by text. Can I come by tomorrow?" I looked at the message for a moment. "Yes," I wrote. "I'll have coffee." Jen came at 10. She sat at the kitchen table in her realtor blazer and her good boots, and she had the look she got when she was about to tell you something she'd been sitting on for longer than was comfortable. I put coffee in front of her, sat down, waited. Derek's firm lost 3 clients in Q3. Big ones. The Harrington account, which I know because the Harringtons are clients of mine and they mentioned switching advisors. 2 others I've heard about through the network. She wrapped her hands around the mug. His firm is small, 7 people. 3 major clients walking in 1 quarter is significant. How significant? The kind of significant that explains why the Eastlake office fell through. The kind that explains, she paused, why he might be particularly interested in what resources are available in his extended family. I was quiet for a moment. "He asked me to co-sign something last spring," I said. "A lease application. Said it was for Clarissa's studio space." Jen looked at me sharply. "Did you?" "No. I said I'd need to see the full documentation first, and then I didn't hear about it again." "Ellie," she set down her mug, "that might have been the Eastlake office, not Clarissa's studio." I let that sit. Outside, the climbing America rosebush had gone fully bare, just canes now, and the structure underneath, which was actually quite beautiful if you knew how to look at it. "He's drowning," Jen said, "and he's been standing in your kitchen for 2 years, acting like the expert in the room." "Yes," I said. "What are you going to do with this?" I thought about it. I thought about the 16-page optimization plan. I thought about the word liability. I thought about the papers placed on top of my napkin in front of 12 people who had come to celebrate my daughter's birthday. Then I thought about Clarissa's voice on the phone. "He means well, Mom. He genuinely thinks he's helping." "Nothing yet," I said. "I'm going to wait." "Wait for what?" "For him to ask." Jen looked at me. "You think he'll ask you for help?" I think, I said, that a man who just lost 3 major clients and had a financing application denied is going to need a financial consultant eventually. I stood up to refill her coffee. And I think when he does, he's going to have very limited options and a very specific need. And I think he is going to come here.
And when he does? I set the coffee pot down. I'll help him, I said. I'm a professional. Jen stared at me.
Ellie, are you going to charge him?
Of course, $250 an hour, standard Seattle rate for senior-level consultants.
The kitchen was quiet. Then Jen Collins, who had been in real estate for 15 years and had seen most things, put her head down on her arms on my kitchen table and laughed for a very long time. December came, and with it the particular quality of Seattle winter that isn't dramatic. No blizzards, no ice, just gray and rain and the low light that makes you realize how much you'd been relying on the sun without knowing it. I decorated the house the way I always did. The wreath on the door, the live one from the Pike Place vendor I'd been buying from for 20 years. The lights along the porch railing, the small ceramic nativity scene that had been my mother's, and before that her mother's, and which had a shepherd missing his left arm since 1987 and would not be replaced. Sunday dinners continued. Derek came. He was different isn't quite the right word. Quieter, watchful in a way that had shifted from the watchfulness of someone surveying a landscape to the watchfulness of someone who has realized the landscape is surveying back. He stopped bringing printed materials. He stopped commenting on my expenditures. Once, in early December, I made tamales, a full production, the kind that takes all day, using the recipe from my friend Rosario, who taught me 30 years ago when we both worked at Hartwell, and who would be horrified to know I was measuring corn husks per unit cost. Rosario had since moved to Albuquerque, and we spoke on the phone every few weeks. She had impeccable instincts and absolutely no interest in spreadsheets, which had always been part of why I liked her. Derek sat at the kitchen counter while I worked and watched for a while without speaking.
Then he said, "That's a lot of work."
"It is." "How long have you been making them?"
"Since about 1989. Rosario taught me. She grew up in Oaxaca, her grandmother's recipe." I pressed the masa into a husk. "You met Rosario at Clarissa's graduation party."
"I didn't realize that was—" He stopped. Tried again. "I didn't realize you'd been doing this that long." "Most things I do, I've been doing that long," I said. "That's generally what 67 years looks like." He was quiet. "The dinner last month. What you said about not everything being a transaction." I kept working. "I've been thinking about that," he said. "Good." "I don't think He stopped, started again. This was difficult for him. I could see it costing something. "I don't think I handled the birthday dinner well." I set down the husk I was working with, turned to look at him. He was sitting very straight, the way people sit when they're holding something difficult. "No," I said, "you didn't." "I thought I was being useful." "I know. I do that. I organize things, try to fix things." A pause. "Clarissa says I do it when I'm stressed." I looked at him for a long moment. He was 38 years old, and he looked, just then, much less certain than he usually looked, which was the most honest I'd ever seen him. "Derek," I said, "are you all right?" Something moved across his face. He recalibrated almost immediately. I watched him do it, watched the professional composure come back up like a screen, but I'd seen the thing underneath, just for a second. I'm fine. Work has been... There are some challenges. Normal business cycle stuff. Of course, I said. I went back to the tamales. He watched me work for another few minutes and then went to find Clarissa. I stood at the counter and thought, not yet. Not quite. He came alone on a Thursday in January. I knew it was him before he knocked. I'd seen his car from the kitchen window, pulling up to the curb, and I'd watched him sit in it for almost 4 minutes before getting out. That told me everything about what the conversation was going to cost him. I put the kettle on. He knocked. I opened the door. "Do you have a few minutes?" "Come in," I said. "I just made coffee." He sat at the kitchen table, the same chair he always sat in, closest to the window, with his back to the wall in the way that meant he could see the whole room. Old habit. He'd always done that. I put coffee in front of him, sat down across. He looked at the table for a moment, then looked at me. "I need some help." I didn't say anything. "The firm has been... We've had some client losses. Significant ones, and I have a restructuring plan, but I need someone to look at it someone with experience in this kind of, in liability assessment and contract renegotiation, and..." He stopped. "Clarissa says you did that for 30 years. "I did. Hartwell and Associates. Senior accountant for 22 years, financial consultant for 8 more. He looked at his hands. "I made some mistakes the last 2 years. I overextended in a couple of directions, and I didn't see it coming as fast as I should have." He looked up. "I'm not asking for charity. I want to hire a consultant. I can't afford the rates the firms are charging right now, and I need someone I can trust to be discreet about the situation." I let the word discreet hang in the air for a moment. Then I stood up, went to the small desk in the corner of the kitchen, the one where I kept the household files, the bills, the notebook, opened the top drawer, took out a single sheet of paper, came back to the table, set it in front of him, face up. He read it. "This is a consulting agreement. Standard terms, $250 an hour. That's the mid-range Seattle rate for senior consultants. I've noted my credentials and experience in Section 2. I sat back down. Minimum engagement of 4 hours. Payment on completion." He was very still. "You prepared this in advance." "I prepared it when I thought you might need it. I didn't know when." "How long ago?" "November," I said. He looked at the agreement. He looked at me. He looked back at the agreement. "You knew." "I suspected. I've been in this industry long enough to know what a financing rejection looks like from the outside." I folded my hands on the table. "I also know what it looks like when someone is working very hard to appear more in control than they are. You're good at it, Derek. But I've spent 30 years watching people do it." He was quiet for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. A car went by outside. The house made the small sounds old houses make when the heat is running. "You could have said something. When the dinner happened, you could have..." "I know that wasn't okay. You could have called me on it directly instead of..." "Would you have heard me?" Silence. "No," he said. "Probably not." "Then you have your answer for why I did it the way I did." He picked up the pen I'd left on top of the agreement, looked at it, set it down, picked it up again. The parking invoice. $23.60. You never paid it, by the way. A sound, Jesus. I'll add it to the first invoice. Consider it a rounding error. He signed the agreement. We worked for 4 hours at my kitchen table. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't good work because it was. That's the thing about 30 years of doing something. You stop being anything other than good at it. You just are what you are.
Derek had 3 workable options and 2 that weren't, and I told him which were which and why. And I walked him through the liability exposure in his current contracts. And I found 2 places where he could renegotiate terms and recover meaningful ground. And by the end of the 4 hours, he had a document that was actually usable. He was, it turned out, competent when he wasn't performing competence. That was the interesting thing. When he stopped explaining things to me and started actually working, he was sharp. He caught things quickly. He asked good questions. He didn't need things explained twice. At around 2:30, he sat back in his chair and looked at the pages spread across the table and said nothing for a moment. "This is solid." "It is." "You found the Meridian Clause thing in under 20 minutes. I've been looking at that contract for 2 weeks. "I've read a lot of contracts." He was quiet. "Can I ask you something?" "You're paying for the hour," I said. "Ask." A small, almost involuntary sound, not quite a laugh, closer. "Why didn't you ever... Clarissa never told me what you actually did, what your career was. I knew you'd worked somewhere, but I didn't... I assumed..." "You assumed I was a retired school teacher," I said, "because I was a woman in my 60s with a rose garden and a good Lenox china set and a fondness for cooking." He didn't deny it. "I owe you an apology." "Yes." "The birthday dinner was... I was showing off. There were people there I wanted to impress, and I..." He stopped, started again. "I used you to do it. That was wrong." I looked at him for a moment. He was saying the thing he'd been working up to for 2 months. I could see it in the way he'd said it, without the professional frame, without the calibrated warmth, just direct. "Yes," I said, "it was." "I'm sorry." The kitchen was still. "I know," I said. I stood up, collected the papers into a neat stack, put them in a folder, and handed it to him. He took it. Then I went to the counter, opened the drawer, and took out an envelope, held it out. "What is this?" "Open it." He opened it. Inside was a check for $1,000, my fee, made out to him. He stared at it. "I don't. It's for Clarissa." I turned back to the counter. "You two haven't had a vacation in 2 years. That's actually inefficient, Derek. People perform better with rest. There's literature on it. Take her somewhere warm. January in Seattle is terrible, and she's been holding this household together with both hands for longer than she should have had to." He looked at the check, then at me. He didn't say anything for a long time. "She's lucky," he said, "to have you." "I know," I said. "Get her somewhere with a pool." He left 20 minutes later. I stood at the kitchen window and watched him sit in the car again for a moment before he pulled away. Different this time, lighter. Whatever he'd been carrying in had left with him, or at least been redistributed. I went and got the notebook, opened it to the last used page, wrote, "Consulting, 4 hours, paid in full, invoice settled including parking balance." Then, underneath, balance, 0. I thought about that for a moment. Then I added, below it in smaller letters, balance on other matters pending. Not because I was owed anything, but because I knew how to keep books, and some accounts take longer to close than others. Bill came by that evening with the chili he'd promised. We sat on my porch in the cold. He had a good coat, and I had the wool blanket Richard's sister had made, and we had the chili in the big mugs because bowls were impractical outside, and watched the street. "How'd it go?" "Well," I said. "He came?" "He did." "And?"
I charged him $250 an hour. He signed the agreement and we worked for 4 hours. I wrapped my hands around the mug.
I also gave him the fee back for Clarissa's vacation. Bill looked at me. You gave him back the money. Technically, I gave it to him as a gift for my daughter. There's a difference. You're a complicated person, Ellie. I'm an accountant, I said. We have to keep the ledger clean. He laughed at that, the real kind, the kind that makes the porch feel warmer than it is. We sat for a while longer. The street was quiet. A couple walking a dog went by. Someone's porch lights came on at the end of the block. What happens now? With him? I don't know. Something changed today. Whether it holds, whether he can, whether they'll be okay. I watched the dog disappear around the corner. That's not mine to predict. But you helped him. I did what I know how to do. I looked at the numbers and told him the truth. Margaret always said that was the rarest thing, Bill said. Someone who just tells you the truth. I thought about Margaret, who I'd known for 22 years, who had made the best apple pie I'd ever eaten, who had died in April with her husband's hand in hers in the same house where they'd raised their children, the same house that was apparently, according to Derek Stone, a suboptimal use of square footage. She was right, I said. We finished the chili. Bill took the mugs inside and washed them without being asked, which was something Richard used to do, and which still, 7 years later, made me grateful in a way that was hard to articulate. He said goodnight at the door. Ellie, do you think he actually understood what you were doing? The notebook, the invoices. Do you think he got it? I thought about Derek at the kitchen table with the signed consulting agreement in front of him. The way he'd looked when he said, I assumed. The way he'd said, I'm sorry, without the performance around it. I think, I said, that he's starting to. Whether that's enough depends on a lot of things that aren't mine to control. Bill nodded, went down the steps. For what it's worth, the parking invoice was my favorite part. He still owes me $23.60. Put it on his tab. I closed the door. The house was quiet. The good china was in the cabinet. The rose bushes were dormant, which was not the same as dead, just resting, holding everything it knew in the canes and roots, waiting for the light to change. I went to the kitchen, made chamomile tea, sat at the table with the notebook open in front of me. At the top of a fresh page, I wrote, Outstanding. Looked at it for a moment. Then I wrote underneath, The question is whether what was broken can become something else, not what it was. Something else, something that knows what it cost. I closed the notebook. Some accounts, I have found, don't close neatly. They stay open, accruing, and you come back to them and you add a line and you see where things stand, and then you close the ledger for the night. That's not a failure of accounting. That's just what it means to be in a long relationship with something complicated. I finished my tea. Outside, the first drops of January rain had started against the window, steady and without drama, the way Seattle rain usually is. Not a crisis, just a fact. Just the weather telling you where you are and what season it is, and that the roses will be back in spring, whether you're watching or not.